supply. The cross-section displays a clear superposition of strata of fine particles in white and coarse particles in black with clear lamination. Looking at the cross-section of superposed strata, it is tempting to conclude that the strata correspond to successive sedimentary layers, that they result from discontinuous sedimentary periods, that each strata is younger than the one underneath it and older than the one above it, and that all points of the same strata have the same age.
The stratification experiment invalidates these hypotheses because these strata are not identical to successive layers. Moreover, clear stratification is observed on the continuous supply of heterogeneous sand particles.
Why is this important? Well, quite simply, because strata have been used to date sedimentary rocks and the fossils in them for over 100 years. And now, for the first time ever, there is experimental proof to show how strata form. And it is quite obvious that strata cannot be used to date either fossils or rocks. In fact, the fossils in the bottom strata could be younger than the fossils in the top strata.
Here you see some sea creatures which live at different ecological levels. A heavy influx of sediment arrives and they all get buried. Eventually, if no air gets to them, they could turn into fossils. Obviously, those buried in the top strata are the same age as those in the bottom strata, as they were buried in the same layer of sediment. Then another heavy layer of sediment arrives, and more sea creatures are trapped. But what is more important is the ones at the top of the previous layer were buried before the one in the bottom of the last layer. So the one at the top here is older than the one at the bottom.
Let the director of the research program explain.
La théorie de l'évolution se base sur la
Evolution
croyance
theory is based upon the belief that a succession of fossil species in a scale of geological time demonstrates that evolutionary progress has taken place. As we have seen, however, and as we have shown in the laboratory, layers of incoming sediment have been wrongly identified as being strata. The scale of geological time and the chronological succession of fossils have been calculated on this mistaken belief that strata are successive layers of sediment. A single layer of sediment can sort itself out into parts of many strata. So the position of fossils in the rock strata could simply indicate the ecological zones of marine species. Stratigraphy, as interpreted by observable facts and experimental data, challenges the geological timescale and therefore evolution theory.
How old is the Earth? Is it millions of years or just a few thousand years? And what does radiometric dating tell us about the age of rocks? The science of physical chemistry can throw some light on these questions. And Professor Edward Boudreau is a physical, inorganic chemist who teaches at a university in New Orleans, Louisiana, and he has studied these matters. So he should be able to help us. Professor Boudreau, it is explained elsewhere in the program that the strata and the fossils in the rock can give no indication as to the age of those rocks. Can you tell us if there are any other methods by which the rocks of the strata can be dated? For example, by carbon-14 dating.
Well, let us get one thing clear about carbon-14. It is an unstable radioactive form of the element carbon, which occurs in all living matter. A living organism, when it's alive, is absorbing and expelling carbon, a small amount of which is carbon-14. And at some point in time when an organism dies, the carbon-14 that was present, remaining at the point of death, is what would be detected radioactively. A piece of wood, for example, or a bone, would contain a small amount of carbon-14. When the tree which bore the wood or the animal which bore the bone died, that carbon-14 that remained is decaying. It takes thousands of years for the decay process to occur. About 5,760 years for half an original amount of carbon-14 to decay into a stable isotope of carbon-12. So by measuring how much of it has decayed, an indication of how long ago the organism was alive can be obtained. As rocks were never alive, they contain no carbon-14. Even the fossils in the rocks cannot be dated by this method because the original living matter in them has turned into stone.
Does this mean that the fossils can't be dated by radioisotopes?
Well, certainly not by carbon-14 with any degree of reliability. As you know, virtually all the fossils are found in sedimentary rocks, and because this type of rock rarely contains radioactive elements, the fossils have had to be dated by rock strata in which they are found. And as we know, the latest experiments show that rock strata give no indication of age. Other types of rocks, such as crystalline rocks, which do not contain fossils, and lava, do sometimes contain radioactive elements, and these isotopes are used to date them.
Can you tell us, in simple terms, how you date a fossil or rock with a radioisotope?
Yes, let us take a radioactive element such as uranium. This element decays very slowly into a non-radioactive element, which is lead. Now, the rate of the decay can be measured in the laboratory. So by comparing what's left of the uranium element in the rock with the amount of decayed lead element that was formed, and knowing the rate of decay, an idea can be had of how long it has taken for the lead to form.
So, if half of the uranium has decayed into lead, and by knowing how long it takes for uranium to decay into lead,
yes,
you can tell the age of the rock.
That's the theory.
Why do you say theory? Surely if it's a process you can observe and measure, it must be a fact.
Not at all. Look again at the diagram. You can see that there are a number of uranium particles, the orange ones, and a number of lead particles, the blue ones. Here we have to make three major assumptions. The first is that all of the lead particles were originally uranium particles, but there is no reason to believe that there were not some lead particles in the rock when it was formed. You see, there is plenty of natural lead in rocks that doesn't come from uranium at all.
Really?
Yes. Let us take the extreme case. If this rock contained radioactive uranium and no lead, then the lead that would appear as a consequence of uranium decay would be a fairly accurate measurement of the age of that rock. Or to take a more likely situation, that at least some of the lead was in the rock when it was formed, then the age of the rock is much less than we are led to believe. Then there's the matter of leaking out due to solubility.
Could that happen?
Most definitely. Salts of uranium and other radioactive elements are quite capable of dissolving in water and therefore will be removed from the sample. So if the rock had been exposed to water for some period of time, such as during a flood, some of the uranium could have been washed out. This would mean that the age ascribed to the rock would be much too great.
But surely there must be other radioactive material and elements which are more reliable than uranium.
Well, there's radioactive thorium, and there is strontium and rubidium, and there's potassium. But these are no more reliable than uranium. The salts of these latter elements are even more soluble